Hey everyone, and welcome. So you want to unlock the real power of Cisco ACI? You know, all that cool logical stuff like tenants and application profiles? Well, before we can even think about that, we have to build a rock-solid physical foundation. We've got to teach our switches and ports how to speak the ACI policy language. In this explainer, we're going to build that essential policy bridge step by step and really master the physical rules that make everything else possible.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to kick things off with a quick overview, just to get our bearings. Then we'll start building our foundation with domains and VLAN pools. After that, we'll connect them with the super important AAEP, define the rules of the road with interface policies, bundle them up into profiles, and finally, push it all out to our switches. Sound good? Let's get started.
So first things first, let's talk about the fabric access policy. Seriously, think of this as the master blueprint for your entire physical network. It's the whole collection of settings that you absolutely must have in place before you can even dream of deploying your tenant configurations. Getting this right from the start is just critical for a stable and predictable fabric. Okay, so at the heart of all this are what we call physical constructs. Now, that might sound a little fancy, but it's really just the umbrella term for all the individual policy pieces we're about to build. These are the fundamental instructions that tell your physical switches and ports exactly how to behave, creating that all-important bridge between the raw hardware and the cool application policies you're going to build later. Let's start building our foundation. The first two pieces we need to lay down are domains and VLAN pools. This is where we answer two really basic but crucial questions. First, what kind of system are we connecting to our fabric? And second, what VLANs is that system going to be allowed to use? Let's take a super common example, a VMM, or Virtual Machine Manager, domain. This is the piece that creates the handshake between your ACI fabric and a hypervisor like VMware. When you set this up, you're essentially telling the ACI controller, the APIC, how to talk to something like vCenter so it can automatically push network configurations right down to the virtual switches. It's pretty slick. Now, a domain is great, but it's kind of useless without any resources to work with, right? That's where a VLAN pool comes into the picture. It's just a reserved block of VLAN IDs that you hand over to a domain. And this is a huge deal because it lets the APIC manage all the VLAN assignments from one central place. This saves you from that classic networking nightmare of VLAN ID conflicts and makes sure everything is consistent across your entire fabric. All right, now this is a really important choice you have to make. How do we actually hand out these VLANs? It's a key best practice. For those really fluid environments, like a VMM domain where VMs are spinning up and moving all the time, you're going to want to use dynamic allocation. That lets the APIC automatically grab a VLAN from the pool whenever it's needed. But for more predictable bolted-down connections, like a physical server or an external router, you'll use static allocation, where you are the one who manually assigns the specific VLAN.
Okay, we've got our domains, which define what is connecting, and we've got our VLAN pools, which define the resources. But right now, they're just kind of floating around in logical space. How do we actually link them to the real physical ports on our switches? Well, the answer is this magical thing called the Attachable Access Entity Profile, or AAEP. Just think of it as the central piece of glue that holds our entire policy bridge together.
You know, the AAP's job sounds simple, but it is absolutely vital. It maps our domains to our interface policies. It's a purely logical object. You don't configure things like speed or protocols on it, you just give it a name and tell it what to connect. It's the central meeting point where you basically say, hey, the VLANs from this pool, which are being used by this domain, can now be used on any physical port that's also connected to me. So, we've connected our logical domains to the potential for physical connectivity. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty and define the actual rules for those connections. We're talking about things like link speed, neighbor discovery protocols like CDP or LLDP, and link aggregation with LACP. This is all handled by interface policies. And ACI makes this really elegant with a neat two-step process. First, you create all these little individual policies for each specific thing. So you'll make one policy for LLDP, another one for LACP, one for Strom control, and so on. Then you bundle all of those little policies together into a single reusable object called an interface policy group. It's like building with Legos.
And you know, the source material puts it perfectly here. The interface policy group really is just a container. By itself, it doesn't do anything. It just holds a collection of other policies. And this is what makes your configuration so powerful and modular. You can create one standard server port policy group and then apply it over and over again anywhere you need it.
And of course, there are different flavors of these containers, depending on what you need to do. An access port group is your bread and butter. It's for standard individual ports. A port channel group is what you use when you want to bundle multiple physical links on a single switch to act as one big pipe. And then there's the VPC group, which is for bundling links across a pair of switches to give you that ultimate redundancy.
So far, so good. We have our what, the domains. We have our how, the interface policy groups, and we have the glue connecting them, the AAEP. But now we get to the big question. Where does all this stuff actually get applied? We need to tell ACI how to attach these policy containers to the actual hardware, and we do that through a hierarchy of profiles.
First up in this hierarchy is the interface profile. Its whole purpose in life is to select a specific set of physical ports, like, say, Ethernet 1/1 all the way through 1/10, and then associate them with one of those interface policy groups we just made. This is the step where you finally link your bundle of rules to a concrete set of physical ports.
And the final piece of this entire puzzle is the switch profile. This profile does exactly what it sounds like. It selects one or more of your physical leaf switches and then associates them with an interface profile. So, see how it all chains together? The switch profile points to the switch, the interface profile points to the ports on that switch, and the policy group gives those ports their configuration. And just like that, we've actually constructed our entire policy chain from the ground up. So, let's wrap this up by looking at the best way to apply all this in a real-world environment, focusing specifically on how you should structure your switch profiles to get the most clarity and control. When you're out in the field, Cisco basically recommends two main strategies. The first is to create one unique switch profile for each individual leaf switch. This gives you incredibly granular control, which is fantastic for things like standalone servers. The second, and probably more common strategy, is to create one single profile for each VPC pair. By selecting both switches in that one profile, you guarantee that their VPC port settings will be identical, which is absolutely essential for a stable VPC.
And there you have it. That is our complete policy bridge. We started with the what, our VLAN pools and domains. We defined the how with our reusable interface policy groups. We connected everything with that crucial AAEP glue, and we applied it to the where using our interface and switch profiles. This entire structure is the essential groundwork that gets your physical fabric ready for the real magic, the tenant policies.
So you did it. Your physical fabric is now fully configured and completely policy-driven. The groundwork has been laid and the foundation is rock solid. Which brings us to the next logical question. Now that you've built this amazing foundation, what kind of application-centric tenant policies are you going to build on top of it?